You're listening to Unlocking the Unconscious with urban empath Rachael Marie Shaffer. Rachael is passionate about teaching others the tools, strategies, and techniques that have proven transformative and empowering on her healing path. Her light-hearted and heartfelt approach gently guides you to your personal wealth of inner knowing and tremendous ability to heal while challenging limiting beliefs. Tune in every fourth Sunday of the month at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern for Unlocking the Unconscious with Urban Empath. You're listening to Wolf Spirit Radio.
We're breathing again.
Hey there, Wolfpack. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us for the second show of Unlocking the Unconscious with Urban Empath. My name is Rachael Marie Shaffer, and I'm so honored and grateful to be part of this wonderful community. I do have an announcement before we get started. I'll be hosting a free online essential oils class called Nourish Yourself with Essential Oils. And there are 3 time options. This Tuesday, April 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday, April 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, or Wednesday, May 2nd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I'd love to have you. If one of those times works, you can RSVP at urbanempath.com/blog, and the first blog post will have the link to register. So excited to see you there if you're interested. And by the way, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the term empath. You know, and I'm sure many of you have these experiences. We have the tendency to be highly attuned to our environment and others, even taking on thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations as our own. And when you plunk an empath down in New York City for 12 years, you get an urban empath, and that's where I got the name. So for today, I really wanted to share some experiences that I've had on my journey through healing, self-awareness, and kind of understanding my energy field, how it works, so that I'm able to help others in the same way. And, you know, essential oils are one tool that have played a huge role in my personal healing and transformation journey, as have crystals, sound meditation, family constellation therapy, Reiki and other energy healing modalities, spiritual coaching, and intuitive counseling. And, you know, it hasn't been a straight line along the way, more like a spiral. I recently finished The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which is a phenomenal book in which you take a 12-week journey toward creative recovery, is what she calls it. It's great for blocked artists, uninspired writers, and anyone feeling that they could use a creative spark and a stronger connection to their creator or higher power or source energy. I couldn't recommend it more highly. In the book, Julia compares the healing or growth process as a spiral path up to the top of a steep mountain. And as we climb, you know, we continually circle back on the same views over and over, and at slightly different altitudes, thinking, I've been here before. And in a sense, we have been revisiting the same issues over and over, peeling back the layers, healing at different levels, you know. The Artist's Way is actually a spiritual journey and a pilgrimage home to the self. Reintegrating aspects of yourself, as many modalities are. And like all great journeys, it entails what Julia calls dangers of the trail, which the process was designed to help you anticipate and navigate through when they show up for you. And they will. They do. They're tests, right? They're just check-in points to see where you're at and how you've progressed. It gets you in touch with your inner knowing and guidance system. You know, working with these types of book journeys has been extremely therapeutic and healing for me. I've also worked through soul coaching by Denise Lynn, as well as Calling in the One by Catherine Woodward Thomas. And the process in all of these books was really deep work and thoroughly transformative, all leading you back to yourself. I actually blogged about the experiences with all of them. And you can find that on my Instagram page. Just look up urban_empath or the website urbanempath.com. You can also find, I vlogged the journey as well on YouTube. You can look up Urban Empath there and find me, as well as on Facebook, Urban Empath. It's really worth the investment in yourself to take the time to work through the exercises and chapters in any or all of these books. And, I'm currently looking for the next one to continue my path of growing and, this spiritual journey. And because realistically, a healing journey is ongoing. I'm far from finished. But when I look back, I'm kind of in awe at the things I've been through and experienced along the way. I was introduced to crystals, essential oils, sound healing instruments, and books with different philosophies and methods of healing. When I began working at a metaphysical bookstore in New York City called East West Living. Being in the presence of and handling crystals every day initiated so many unbelievable and transformative experiences. I remember fairly early on in my work with crystals, I had put on a fairly basic crystal chakra layout. It was probably, I started, with just a small set of crystals I worked with. And it was probably really basic. Like my guess would be I had red jasper at the root, carnelian at the sacral chakra, tiger eye at the solar plexus, probably rose quartz at the heart, blue lace agate at the throat, sodalite at the third eye, and amethyst at the crown. And knowing me, I was probably holding selenite in either hand. It's my favorite. And so when I first started, the pieces that I worked with were usually tumbled stones and relatively small, but I would still feel the effects fairly intensely. I actually vividly recall lying in my bed in Jackson Heights, Queens, with this crystal layout on and meditating and just kind of feeling my way through, seeing what would come in. And at some point, a scene popped into my mind from one of my favorite TV shows as a teenager. And the show was called My So-Called Life, starring Claire Danes and Jared Leto. And it was brilliantly written by Winnie Holtman, with all kinds of metaphors and the scene, the episode of this show where this particular scene was showing up was, she used, tarot and tarot cards as metaphors. It was just really brilliantly written. It was only on for one season, so chances are high that you've never seen it or even heard of it, but I just related so deeply to the plot and the vibe of the show. Anyway, in one of the episodes, the character played by Claire Danes, named Angela, begs her extremely strict mom to go to her best friend's birthday party instead of her grandparents' anniversary party. After a little bit of a battle over it, she allows Angela to go. And at the party, her best friend ends up overdosing from a combination of drugs and alcohol. And Angela calls her mom for help, and after the best friend is rushed to the hospital, her stomach is pumped, and she's eventually in stable condition. So at this point, Angela's mom asks her and her other friend, Ricky, who was also there for the party and all these events, she asks them, how would you like to attend a very dull party? Referencing to the grandparents' anniversary party. And this phrase is really the key to this story. So, cut back to all these years later, while I'm lying in my bed, meditating, wearing this basic crystal layout, this 10-second clip of the show kind of looped around in my head. Like just this phrase along with the images. I remember the scene vividly for some reason. It just brought me so much comfort. And relief for some reason. I guess I was very emotionally involved in that episode. that sentence, it just brought me so much relief. This this 10-second clip just kept replaying, giving me the sensation of relief, because of all the context surrounding its meeting from this episode of the show I was really connected to. And it seemed to be gathering energy as it swirled around in my head. I started to feel sensations and movement on the left side of my abdomen. And eventually, what felt like a bubble of stagnant energy kind of freed up. It freed itself up from wherever it had been stored away and began traveling up the left side of my abdomen until it got to my throat. When it got to my throat, my mouth kind of braced itself open to push it out. Almost how it does when, you're about to be ill or if you're singing really high or, maybe if you're sobbing uncontrollably. Only there were no tears, there were no sound. And it's funny, if you've ever seen the movie The Green Mile, I imagine that it probably looked like what happened to Michael Clark Duncan's character, John Coffey, the big guy that was falsely accused and he was in prison, when he would, heal someone and have to release the energy. Only my release didn't come with the digital flies. So, what's interesting about this is that I just started studying medical intuition with Carolyn Meese, and she talks about the pancreas being associated with a sense of responsibility. So when I heard her say that, I replayed it a few times because it was stirring something. I was starting to remember this, and reflecting back and contemplating that idea that, the pancreas is associated with, an inflated sense of responsibility, or the opposite, not wanting any responsibility. So I actually thought back to this experience because, I had a pattern at work, and I'm still managing this, of taking on more responsibility than was necessary and that I was actually being compensated for. It's in my nature, and I'm working on managing that. The energy, that was freed up in my system and released from the throat, well, it seemed to have come from where, and if you look up the anatomy of the body, where the tail of the pancreas is located, there on the left side of the body. That's where I perceived it coming from. So, and the fact that scene from the show was all about taking responsibility for saving the girl's life who had overdosed, and the resolution that followed led me to believe that that's exactly what happened. That I had stored some of this sense of responsibility in my pancreas and then releasing it out. So my subconscious mind or unconscious mind used that footage and soundbite to dislodge the stagnant energy that I was storing there, certainly influenced by the crystals that I was working with, right? And even though this happened almost 10 years ago, I can still recall it vividly and feel the relief from that phrase. How would you like to attend a very dull party? It was just the emotion behind it. Because on its own, those words don't really mean that much, do they? And probably sound a little off-putting, like, no, I don't want to attend a very dull party. But the context really, elicits that emotional response for me. And all that it implied in the context of the episode of my favorite show growing up, as a teenager. So it provided me with so much comfort in that moment. And what I learned from this incident is that we release so much from the throat chakra. It's one way we can really release, which is one of the reasons that singing has been so healing for me. It's one way I release energy. We express through that chakra and it's one chakra that, expresses and goes out into the world and kind of, is outward focused, and other chakras are inward focused. They kind of have that pattern, where they manage, the energy center manages the inner workings, you know, and in the inner relationship, with the system. And then others sort of relate to the outside world more. And the throat is one where it relates to the outside world. It's where we express, you know, our message, our contribution often comes from the throat. And, you know, another reason singing can be so healing is because it's using the entire body as an instrument and creating resonance. And so it's one way that has been, so powerful in my healing journey. And it's the most powerful way I can heal myself. Because it works with emotions and things like that as well. And, you know, you can tap into any emotion, use, you know, all parts of yourself. You're working with your unconscious. It's just one of my favorite ways. So, you know, right around this time where I was beginning to work with crystals and understand the effects and, experiment and have these experiences, with these, energy tools and spiritual tools, I had my very first energy healing session in the form of Reiki by my new friend at the time, but now she's like a sister to me. Her name's Krista Mitchell. She wrote the crystal book, Change Your Energy, which I highly recommend. Most people find that it's their favorite crystal book. And she has another one in the works. And, you know, I had never experienced anything like it before. As soon as we sat down to talk about what was about to happen, because I didn't know what to expect at all. I don't think I had even really had a lot of massage up to that point. So I didn't really understand what the possibilities were. As soon as she kind of sat me down to start, just talking about what to expect or ask me questions to prepare for this session, I just started crying like out of nowhere. And I felt really embarrassed because I really didn't know why I was crying. And, you know, she calmly let me know that it's okay. This is simply a release. You know, the release process is initiating, and she led me into her healing room to start the session. So I mean, I had always been sensitive, and I knew from there, I must be very sensitive to this energy. I already started feeling it, and that's very common. Not everyone's as sensitive or emotional as I am, but, that was my experience, just sort of already feeling the effects. I think she had a client right before me as well. So, just feeling those, the energy already present, the space was already held for somebody else. So I just kind of walked into it as well. And, you know, during the session, as she began working on the top of my head, I could really feel a release of tension and an expanded feeling. And, you know, at the time I probably would have said it felt like clouds parting, you know, as energy was cleared and tension sort of eased at the crown. It just felt like clouds were parting. I don't know. It was just kind of subtle. And I had gone through, like a few months prior, had gone through a breakup that kind of shattered my heart. It was, you know, probably the worst heartache I had ever felt in my life and ever have felt since. And so when she got to my heart center, a flood of emotions was stirred and released. And I I felt it even more intensely when she worked on the back of the heart chakra after I had turned to lay face down for the second half of the session. And what I learned from this experience and working with Krista for a while, first of all, how powerful energy work is for healing, because I was clueless. I didn't have any reference up until that point. And secondly, that I felt more relief when Reiki was performed on the back of my system. This isn't always true, but for me, that was my experience. It just felt more comfortable, first of all, because I did so much interacting energetically with people all day long. It just felt like such a relief to be face down and not have to deal with anything relationally that way, and to have someone working on the back of my system. It just felt like such a relief. And I continue to kind of prefer that. And I later learned that the back of the chakras are how we relate to ourselves. That's one way of looking at it. And the front correspond with how we relate to the outside world. So, and perhaps because I'm introverted, I experience the most relief when the focus of the healing session is on the back. You know, and also many people neglect the back of the chakras in healing work, and really just their awareness of them. We often hold on to things that were meant to just pass right through, right out the back of our energy system, because we lack the awareness to open and let things pass through. And when we're in resistance, it kind of closes off those centers. And then we end up carrying a lot of baggage in the form of thoughts, emotions, and, you know, other forms of vibration that really were meant to just be passersby. So just keep that in mind, and don't neglect the back of your chakra system when engaging in healing work and clearing your energy field. I really learned that one the hard way, and I'm still learning to let things flow without holding on, particularly with regard to empathic transmissions. When I take something on that's not mine, I do still have the tendency to resist it. And what that does is it just kind of amplifies it and grows it and makes me hold on to it, because in part that's attachment, right? Instead of not having a charge around it and saying, oh, I'm sensing that, I'm feeling it, and okay, you can go now. Instead, just sort of, really, really resisting and trying to hold it away from you kind of empowers it. So it's really, really wise to instead just let it flow through, let it come out the back. I actually learned that, from, can't remember his name, but he would speak in New York City often. His name is Dave Markowitz, I think, something like that. And he wrote a book called Self-Care for the Self-Aware, which I almost called this radio show that until I thought I created that. I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. And then I Googled it to see if it was taken, and I was like, oh, I had heard it. I had heard this one before. That's where it came from. So yeah, I think he wrote that book, Self-Care for the Self-Aware. Very interesting. He's a teacher for empaths and how to work with your energy system. And so I first learned that from him and heard that concept of letting things flow through and just being aware of the back of the chakras too. Because often, you know, we're just so focused on how we're relating with the world and that front of the chakra system. Remember, these are multi-dimensional energy centers. So it, you know, keeping your awareness on that fact can help with optimal energy flow. So I really enjoyed the effects of Reiki, and as I often do, if something works for me, I really want to go on to study it so I can share it with other people. It's not enough for me to just say, go see this healer. I want to do it for people as well. So it really was one of the main things that initiated my path as a healer and helping others heal themselves, is that experience. And so I went on to receive my Reiki attunements in levels 1, 2, and master teacher level in Western Reiki, and then go on to study Jikajin Reiki. And so I've studied with 4 different master teachers myself. And, you know, I recall the amazing experience of my initial attunement, which it really awakened my third eye and inner vision. So we were guided at my Reiki level 1 training, on a visualization to meet our Reiki guides. And I think people often have this experience when they study Reiki. They get their first attunement and, they're either assigned a Reiki guide to work with, like in spirit form, or they meditate and meet them for themselves. And I was not very experienced in purposefully accessing my inner eye. So, it proved very challenging for me because oftentimes you probably find this to be true if you do a lot of meditation work and you're more experienced now. When you first started, you didn't realize, that it really could just be a softening of the gaze, you know, relaxing into it. It's like you try so hard, you're forcing it to happen, and you're never going to reach it that way. But it's like, it's what happens when you're new, right? You work so hard for it. And I remember not really understanding where to access those images, nor how subtle it could be. I really didn't get that. So I was trying so hard. And like I said, it's about being in a receptive state. So if you're trying really hard to make something happen, you're just in the wrong state. It's not going to happen by forcing it and trying to make it happen. So, when I closed my eyes, and if you close yours, you may notice, that there are almost little grains of sand intermixed with the black of the darkness when you close your eyes. You may see that as well. That's what I saw when I closed my eyes. And I remember seeing the little grains kind of moving around, almost like, what is that, an Etch-a-Sketch or something like that, where, or a magnetic picture with the sand in there where it moves and forms images. I remember seeing, those little grains, those little flecks moving around to form pictures. And I saw a lion's head with a huge mane form in those little flecks. And I was really, really trying hard, right, to see anything else, but, you know, it was not happening. I was just trying too hard. I thought I would see it with my physical eye. And many people have that experience, but it's not when they're forcing it or pushing it. It really is about, receiving it, being in a receptive state. So I was having some difficulty, but after some time on the guided journey, I started to relax a little bit more and understand that the images were in the same place, kind of in the back of my mind, where I would daydream from. You know, that place where you're on autopilot and you just start seeing a movie in your mind or thinking about something. That's where it was coming from. So after I realized that, I had a much easier time when I had that understanding. And this is all like the first experience, right? This first attempt. And you know, the attunement really, really did blast open my third eye. So it started the awakening. It was really powerful, but, again, I had to learn how to wield it, how to work with it. So as I'm learning this process, right, and discovering where visualization comes from, where it is in my mind, how do I repeat this, how do I make this a science so I can find my way back here and recreate this. And by the way, this is where if I'm doing an intuitive reading for somebody, this is where the images come in. It's that same place. It's that same receptive place. The images kind of flow through there. So when I was doing the meditation to meet my Reiki guides, again, this is my first experience doing this guided meditation and trying to visualize in my inner eye. So I'm on this, I think we went on this little visual, like, pilgrimage or journey through a garden and, down a trail and all these little turns, and there's a tree here and, guiding us so we can, start to learn how to access this and see these things. When it was time to finally meet my Reiki guide, who comes around the corner but the Burger King, okay? And mind you, I have to share this with the group, right? We're gonna share who our Reiki guide is. And I was not about to tell people that my Reiki guide was a mascot for a fast food joint. It just was not gonna happen. I was so confused. I was like, really? Like, that is not possible. So, I don't know if whoever was giving me these images, wherever I was receiving them from, had a really good sense of humor or what. But thank God, I was so relieved that it was like, just kidding, and the Burger King went away. And then eventually Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene and Jesus showed up. He was there too, pretty shortly after, and I was so relieved. Which I find that very interesting, because at that point in my life where I was studying Reiki, I had kind of had a falling out with Christianity. I was raised Catholic, but had experiences that initiated a disillusionment with religion in general and the church. But I'll tell you what, I was so relieved and welcoming to my actual Reiki guides because of that initial vision of the Burger King. So that might have been a way, a very wise way to drop my resistance, my expectations, because, I was hoping maybe it'll be a goddess, or, things I was really learning about and diving into at that time. I was really looking forward to having like a really powerful goddess or, I don't know, some ascended master to guide me and teach me but I definitely wasn't looking for the Burger King to help me with my Reiki journey. When I shared that with, one of my Reiki masters later on, she said, it's funny you say that. I actually saw the Little Caesars pizza guy, before my actual guide came. So, I mean, I don't know if that's a normal experience or if it's just a thing in our lineage. It's very weird, but like I said, I think it was really purposeful to kind of drop my defenses and have me kind of open to seeing, these religious figures of my past who I do feel connected to. You can't help it. If you're born into a tribe, and Carolyn Neese talks about this too, it becomes part of, your system. You're being guided about where to invest your energy. And when you're born into religion, that's one thing that your energy flows into, because we don't know how to do that for ourselves when we're babies. So, oftentimes the tribe will teach us where to invest our energy. So kind of, can't help but be connected there. It's what I was born into. And I'm very grateful now. Wow, that's really powerful. At the time, as I said, I was still going through my disillusionment. So, but now I'm much more grateful and appreciative that I don't have to say the Burger King is my Reiki guide. What can he really show me? And with regard to empathic transmission, I recently, a few months ago, had some pain in my left knee, and I had suspected that it was an empathic sensation. So, I surrounded my knee with selenite. Selenite's really powerful for moving stagnant energy out of the system. It can clear and charge other crystals. It's one of my favorites. It invites angelic energy into the home. It can be protective of the home of, kind of harsh, or lower vibrational energy from entering. You can put a wand in your window, or I have sort of, gridded my space with lots of selenite. I have selenite spheres. Spheres are great because they sort of envelop an entire aura of a space or a person, taking on that shape of the orb. And affecting the energy of a space that way. So, one of my favorites. And so I have a lot of it, and it's really great for pain. When I surrounded my knee with the selenite, and some of them were terminated, some of the selenite, I have massage wands, and I also have some that have terminations or they're points at the end, right? So these are have been smoothed, because selenite is generally like the flaky, splintery, feel. These have been smoothed, and a few of them have been terminated. So there was a point at the end. So I put the points turned down towards the bottom of my foot, around my knee. So I surrounded my entire knee, the back. I put it on top. I had my knee elevated. And I could actually feel the pain move down through a channel, in the left side of my calf. And it felt like an electric current, and going through, and it was like cramping my leg a little bit as it was moving through. So it may have been, a block in the flow of energy. And, I suspect still that it was, something I took on empathically, but, so as it was moving through, it was kind of cramping my calf, and eventually it did release out the bottom of my left foot, out the kidney 1 point, which is where, it's like the garbage chute, or the dumping ground of the body, in medical Qigong, right at the bottom of the foot, a point right, at the bottom of like the padding there, the top of the foot. That's your kidney 1 point, and that's where, all of this stagnant energy kind of dumps out. And, I had never felt anything like that in my life. It was really intense. And, I was amazed at how powerful selenite is for moving that stagnant energy out of my system and really alleviating the pain, because, you hear about the properties, you learn, you read about the physical properties, you learn about the physical properties, and metaphysical properties of these crystals and stones. And it's one thing to kind of know intellectually, but to actually have experiences, it's a whole other thing that you can share with others. This is what happened to me, instead of just listing properties. It's a whole other level. So yeah, that was my experience with the selenite. And now it's really become my go-to for almost every form of pain, even if I know it's on the physical level as well, because it's all aligned. Oftentimes it's triggered by emotions. It can be, start as a thought, and then it aligns to the physical body, and vice versa, So you can treat it on any level. Might as well get to the core issue. And, and crystals can help with that, right? So, and it's funny, I actually remember teaching a customer when I worked at East West Living. I was attempting to teach him how to use a selenite wand, and I was describing it to him as opposed to showing him, which I've since learned. You should just grab it and show them how to do it first. But I was kind of just talking him through it. And so, I was saying, like, you scan the body with it and you feel for areas where stagnant energy needs to be moved out. And I mean, I kind of stood there in shock when he grabbed it. And this is a rough selenite wand, right? This hasn't been smoothed. It's not a massage wand. It's kind of the splintery, flaky selenite, if you've ever worked with it. He started rubbing it on himself physically. And I stood there in shock a little bit because I didn't understand why he didn't get. I meant you're scanning your aura, not your physical body. But, so instead of kind of hovering a few inches away from the body, he was really just rubbing it on his face. And I was thinking, okay, that could actually, give you a splinter or something. What is happening right now? So I learned how to better demonstrate. I was like, just take the selenite wand and show someone how to do it. But I also realized that it's not easy for everyone to understand, that we don't end at our physical body. Like, our energy field extends out. So you can affect your sensations and how you feel with having these crystals in the physical layer of our aura, but not actually on the physical body. Our energy field takes up far more space, and is truly affected by these tools. And, I just did not explain how to use it very effectively, apparently. But I'll never forget that. It was very shocking to see someone just rubbing a rough selenite wand on themselves. So, I had to learn how to communicate and teach about these things much more effectively. And, I suppose in that same vein, it's difficult to understand how one could experience effects of hands-off or even remote energy healing work. That seems hard to understand as well. And I recently had a few sessions with a practitioner of reconnective healing. And I also experienced what's called the reconnection. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, this work is hands-off, and it involves the reconnection itself. It involves tracing the meridian lines in the energy field and reconnecting them to the ley lines of the earth. It's more complex and in-depth than that, I think, but I'm not a practitioner of it. I mean no disrespect to those who are by oversimplifying this process. That's just my basic understanding. And the sessions were incredible, and at times I could feel every cell in my body vibrating. And I did start to feel, sort of, I guess I could describe them as lines of energy kind of coming out of my crown and connecting up and down out the bottoms of my feet, feeling things moving out of my legs and connecting down. I was aware of energy channels, in my system, and that I have never perceived, and experiencing sensations that I never have with energy work before. It was really powerful. And the thing is, it was without attunement, or in-depth protocol. I started watching Dr. Eric Pearl speak about this system, which he founded and began teaching. And, he talks about, being able to work with the energy simply by being in the presence of it for a little while, and that there's no need for, in-depth initiation or attunement, and that it's accessible to anybody. And that as soon as, he consulted other healers, And they began telling him to do certain protocols, right? That he found that the effectiveness of this was hindered. So he went right back to just sort of playing with the energy and allowing it to do what it does, all while transcending technique, which is what we have to do at some point, right? And I really found that fascinating because, with Reiki, it can be a lot of protocol, a lot of hand placement, and eventually you transcend the technique. Eventually you, have to become, more in a receptive state and allowing your intuition to guide you. And there's certainly initiation there, right, with the attunement. But I recall having a similar eye-opening experience when I studied chakra therapy with Anadea Judith. She had us partner up and practice energy work on each other. And at that point, I had studied so many modalities that I had a vested interest in believing that attunement and, practical in-depth training was necessary to have therapeutic effects on another person. So I really had my doubts that simply moving my hands a certain way and having a sort of playful quality would have much effect at all in helping another person to heal. And honestly, I felt a little silly doing it. But I was really amazed when the woman I was paired with had an emotional response and release just from my hands moving in her field a certain way. I didn't have to say an elaborate opening prayer or, access her field with a symbol or call on guides and spirits. Her intelligent system understood the subtle cues I was giving with the hand movements and responded accordingly. And, when I went on to study Jikajin Reiki, that's another thing I came to learn. I studied Jikajin Reiki after the chakra therapy training. So I kind of understood, I didn't recall this consciously. This memory kind of came up as I was preparing for this show. And that's how it often happens, right? But it's all stored there in my unconscious, giving me context. So when I went on to study Jikajin Reiki and, the master, in Jikajin we call our teacher sensei, she, would continually have to explain to me that, the body is responding to cues. It's responding to the cues. So you don't have to be perfectly channeling at all times. She doesn't like to use the word channeling. But, nobody can stand and meditate and be focused and perfectly receptive for an hour. It's not going to happen. And that was a lot of my fear, this perfectionistic tendency of mine. And, it's unrealistic. It's not going to happen. But she said she would constantly have to remind me that, the pressure's not on you. The body has this magnificent ability to heal itself, and it will follow the cues we give it. As a healer, you're not really healing somebody. You're supporting the body's capacity to heal itself. And oftentimes we get in the way of that process. We block it, with, toxicity or, resistance or thoughts or, doubts of that power, and it prevents us from being able to do so. But, what I really appreciated was the consistency and the encouragement that the pressure's not on me as the practitioner to give a perfect session, that the body wants to heal, that our natural state is health. And it's just a subtle reminder to the body. You can move that out. You can release that. You don't need to hold on to this anymore. And it's like the body is, it's like, oh yeah, I can do that. and it responds, and it's very intelligent. We're holding on to a lot of memories and emotions that we were unable or refused to express. And we're able to just sort of remind the system that it's okay, that it's by creating a safe space, and kind of getting your conscious mind out of the way a little bit and allowing the body to do what it needs to do and resetting. And, oftentimes we do this at night, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't, but, that's why, resetting at night through sleep. And we don't always do that, do we? Sometimes we go to sleep with anger or resentment or stress, and we aren't in a state of release or relaxation, and we wake up with the same the same problems. It doesn't feel like a fresh start to a new day. It feels like, oh, I'm waking up to the same problems. But it's one opportunity we have to let go, release, show gratitude. I always like to have a really soft, this is a silly way, it feels a little silly to talk about, but it is one way, it's a really powerful way for me to show myself care, is having a really soft, comfortable blanket. And I love satin pillowcases, and just having that comfort and having gratitude for that right before I fall asleep is really powerful for me in resetting my emotional state for the next day. Ending the day with gratitude, in that way, and, feeling that comfort is one way to affect, the feeling of renewal and recharging for the next day. Cause we oftentimes don't recharge with sleep. Oftentimes we wake up and we feel even more tired than we did the night before. And it's often because we aren't taking the opportunity to release and reset. And that's one way to do it, is to find something like that where it can be a little ritualistic, to, just have really comfy, healing, soothing, bedclothes or pillowcases or whatever it is, to really, really, be able to relax and, feel completely supported by the bed or wherever you're sleeping. Just feel the support of that instead of carrying the tension with you throughout the night. So that's one way of doing it. And so I think maybe we'll take a quick break, if that's okay.
Yep, no problem.
And okay, we'll come back in a few minutes. Okay, so before the break, we were talking about sort of little signposts and experiences I've had on my healing journey that I was hoping would be relatable and, and help you see that, certain sensations that are coming up for you, may have been release or an awakening. And we oftentimes, when we're sensitive to energy, mistake it for, some sort of physical illness. And it certainly can also, affect us in that way as well. But, so I was talking a little bit about my experience with reconnective healing and, as well as crystals and, Reiki and, chakra therapy, which encompasses a lot of things and includes a lot of yoga, which is another thing that I found, so powerful, with such a low investment of time. I felt results from the specific chakra yoga that we did in that class. I really experienced, I'm not a morning person. I don't, love being awake in the morning, but especially when I had to like take the train into the city in the mornings, it just made me feel like I was so weak I didn't have the energetic defenses that I would have if I was really well rested. So early morning, all day trainings that went on for days and days, I often went in feeling very just weak, and my energy field had been intruded upon and invaded through all the other people that were in such close quarters. And that was kind of one of the main reasons that I felt I had to leave New York City. It became very, very harsh and hard on my system. But I found with this particular training that with the movement and the yoga, that it really, really helped me in just 5 minutes. Doing it for just 5 minutes, feeling a whole different sense of renewal and vitality. And it's one of those things like meditation, that has the ability to energize as well as release and soothe. So it's kind of adaptogenic in that way, right? Where some things really help us attain vitality, and then certain things are great for discharging excess energy. And, meditation and yoga are two things. There are others that sort of help us just find balance, no matter which side we're kind of leaning on, which end of the spectrum we're on, we can find balance with those. So I found that really, really interesting, because I'm not one that's really, I don't love yoga. I kind of like, things that are more movement oriented. I don't like, and I'm sure it's my mind resisting wanting something to do. So I know that it would be very therapeutic for me to really, really explore that deeper. But yeah, I had amazing experiences with her working on different poses that really corresponded to different chakras. It was really, really, really fascinating. And going back to the reconnective healing and the reconnection, founded by Dr. Eric Pearl, Dr. Pearl talks about kind of retaining an energy imprint. Particularly, he talks about that as far as not needing an attunement to work with reconnective energy healing, but just to be in its presence and sort of getting the energy imprint. He has that philosophy and theory as far as working with crystals as well, which I found very interesting. It's a really interesting concept. He tells a story of how he was gifted a piece of moldavite, after he had the reconnection, and, after he had this experience, of having the meridian lines drawn on and reconnecting to the ley lines of the earth, and just sort of having this reconnective experience. He began having amazing effects with his chiropractic patients, afterward, and started like kind of playing with the energy and exploring that and the possibilities. And the moldavite that he was gifted, according to him, really did enhance the work and took it to a whole new level. So when, you probably know, those who work with crystals, moldavite is extraterrestrial in origin, and it's really awakening, really powerful, potent stone. And a lot of people can't handle the effects, don't enjoy the effects. It can make some people nauseated. I happen to enjoy working with it. But not everyone does, especially sensitives. It can be a little much. So he tells the story. One day he lost this piece of moldavite, and he searched everywhere for it because he was convinced that it was, the source of all this new level of healing with this energy work that he had never done energy work before this. It was just something that kind of came about from this process for him. And he searched and searched and could not find it. So he was astounded to find that his work maintained the effects that the Moldavite had, when he was carrying it, wearing it, right? Much like he explains, you don't need to be attuned or taught elaborate techniques. You just need to be in the presence of this reconnected healing energy to have the ability transmitted. And he found the same to be true for crystals, particularly this experience with Moldavite taught him that. He never found the Moldavite again, but, he does claim that the influence of that piece remains in his work. And I mean, how interesting is that? I never really thought about it that way, but we are learning and growing and forming relationships with the vibration of these tools. And if you think about it, you're kind of forever changed after that, right? I mean, you don't have to be in a relationship with another person forever to, have growth from it and, reach a new level of understanding and, healing. You can part ways and still take with you the effects. So it made me think of, and that might be common sense, I just never thought of it on that level. So it was very interesting. Like, to me, I had this idea that I had to continually place it on my body, do a layout, hold it to really experience the effects. And this idea, my mind's opening to this, this broader, more expansive view that we're relating, it's not just me taking and using the energy of this tool. I'm relating with it and I can learn from it. And when we're done relating with each other, it can go on to another person. So, I mean, makes sense. I just never really thought of it that way. And it's not really taught that way much, is it? At least I hadn't come up upon that philosophy before. So it was new for me. And I really appreciated that. And crystals are one tool I consistently use for self-healing. And, while I do believe that once I've used a crystal, I can probably have access to the experiences it has taught me in its absence, I still find that I need to work with them consistently. Just like energy work. Like, yeah, I could probably have one reconnective healing session and feel different and maybe find my way back to that effect on my own. But, life comes with stresses. We have stressors. I find myself, having tension in places that I'm sometimes not even aware of. It's like a habit, a pattern, and taking on pain, sometimes growing pains, and just wanting support. So for me, the relief provided from my crystal friends has been immense, and I find that continuing to work with them is appropriate for me. And the amazing experiences I've had while working with them will leave me changed forever. But as I said, with just like the energy work, in order to maintain and build momentum in the direction, it's important for me to continually relate and work with these tools. And I recall this experience with crystals very vividly as well, as it was so odd, intense, and unlike anything I'd been through before. So I was lying in my bed in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, with a crystal layout on. And at this point, I had been working with crystals and other healing tools for just about a decade. So I had graduated to really high vibrational stones and larger pieces than I had initially worked with. I also had, and still have, the tendency to go completely overboard and just cover myself with as many crystals as possible. I don't recommend doing that. But, the whole less is more concept is kind of lost on me sometimes. I just want to address everything all at once. So I don't recommend doing that. And I can only imagine what it must have looked like, Oh boy, Rachael just was in an avalanche, a crystal avalanche, but, I love working with crystals that way. Just completely overboard. Anyway, so I fell asleep while meditating with rather high frequency crystals, and they were still laid out on my chakras. I particularly remember having moldavite on my third eye. And, I'm not really, certain about the other stones, but I definitely remember that was on my third eye. And I ended up falling asleep, and I eventually woke up, and I was not quite all the way back in my body yet. And it felt like my head was in like a tornado or, the propellers of a helicopter or something like that. It felt like there was such an intense wind that it was sort of, physically moving, the flesh of my face, like in the wind of a helicopter propeller or something like that. It was really intense. I felt it physically, like I felt the physical sensations of that. And it sounded like, the propellers of a helicopter as well. It was a loud noise like that. Really intense. And, feeling it on the physical level. And it goes on for what feels like 5 to 10 minutes until eventually I'm back in my body and sort of in shock that just happened to me. And then I saw like a red out the window. I looked out the window and I saw like a red blinking light kind of passing by until it disappeared on the other side of my window. And it was probably an airplane passing by. I mean, I did live near an airport, but, I got really paranoid and was like, was I just abducted? It was just a really, really, really odd experience. I have never had anything happen like that since, but what probably happened is, because of the effect of these intense high frequency stones that I was working with, I began astral traveling. And when I finally, I fell asleep, and then when I finally woke up, I was still in the process of re-entering the physical body through the crown. So I was probably just physically experiencing the spinning crown chakra. I assume that's what was happening now, looking back. Now with a little bit more understanding and less in the throes of paranoia from never having experienced it before. It was very intense. I wonder if anyone else has had that experience. And a lot of things I've learned about the energy system and about healing tools and their potency are from instances like this, where you could consider it a mistake or ill-informed actions on my part, but I'll never forget the lessons and experiences. And, this leads me into my work with essential oils. Again, I made pretty much every mistake you could make, as I was learning, because I didn't educate myself at first. I just kind of jumped in with enthusiasm. And the word oil was a little misleading, right? These aren't oils, they're plant chemicals. And I really underestimated the potency and the effect. So, at first I misused them. I was also first introduced to this powerful form of plant medicine at East West Living. I was just really excited to jump right in and work with them. Made plenty of rookie mistakes. So, what I do remember is my first apartment out of musical theater school which is the reason I moved to New York City, was in Corona, Queens, with a few of my classmates. The only gym in the neighborhood was this lifter's gym. It wasn't very clean. And I think we all at some point ended up contracting ringworm from this gym. And you know that's disgusting. Please don't judge me. There was we all got it. There was no way around it. And for me, it never really fully went away for a long time. And there wasn't a lot of concern. It was a lifter's gym, so there wasn't a lot of concern or care regarding cleanliness. I was one of the only women that went there. So, the ringworm was right in the fold of my arm. I didn't know what it was. I had never had anything like that before. It freaked me out. And I could not get rid of it. It just kept popping up. So I was excited when I learned about the powerful effects of essential oils and that I wouldn't have to use synthetic toxic agents on my body. So I began applying several drops of cinnamon oil. Neat, like not diluted. I did not dilute it. I just put it right on there to this itchy and irritated patch of skin. And, I have to say that it did go away about a week after I began this process of applying the cinnamon oil. I did it once or twice a day. But I noticed that eventually it kind of burnt me and left a scab. So the cinnamon oil was so intense that it had burned my skin because I had applied it without a base or carrier oil. And that's a no-no with oils like cinnamon. Things that are very, very hot and warming. But I was relieved that, the ringworm was gone so I was kind of okay that I had burned myself in the process. It was a learning experience. I would not recommend that you follow suit. I actually had a colleague at work who was also really excited, enthusiastic about essential oils. He ended up drinking cinnamon oil and burning himself internally and he thought he was having a heart attack or something, so he was rushed to the hospital. It's no joke. You can really harm yourself with these things. I think that the word oil tricks people into not understanding how powerful and potent, concentrated these plant chemicals are. But, I really learned my lesson through that experience, and I understood that I needed to use these tools with caution and inform myself and, not just start applying them all over my body and, ingesting them. It's really important to know, to have the information about how to use them. Also around this time, I was hearing all about, how great it was for you to put a drop of grapefruit oil in your water. So I enthusiastically started applying 1 drop of grapefruit oil in a glass of water, daily in the morning and drinking it. And, I say glass, but it was made of plastic. So, and it wasn't disposable or anything. It was the kind of, cups that you would keep in your kitchen and reuse, but it was made of plastic. And the plastic cups started getting cracks in them, and I could not figure it out at first. I didn't understand why. I did some research and I learned that essential oils break down plastic. So, chances are I ingested some of that from those cups out of my lack of information regarding essential oils and their application. So these experiences of my error out of ignorance and not understanding the potency of these tools, it's why I feel compelled to share with people how to use them and their properties. What's the proper use? There are different schools of thought. There are different theories. And we have choices, but we also have to know the limitations. And, that's why I have since become certified in the medicinal uses of essential oils through Floracopia. That's, David Crow's company, and studied the emotional and spiritual effects with Mark Gian. And, there's still so much exploring and practice to do. Learning is just a never-ending journey, isn't it? I mean, I'm just never done. But so yeah, it brings me a lot of joy to kind of share these with other people, and to know that people, have the information and they're not just experimenting with their own system and body. So yeah, please do RSVP for the upcoming it's free, the online class. It's called Nourish Yourself with Essential Oils. You can find the dates and times, at urbanempath.com/blog. And the RSVP link is there. It's the first blog post there. And yeah, I hope you'll join us for that. That'll be fun and informative. And right now I'm diffusing, which is my preferred way of using essential oils, right? That's why it's called aromatherapy. It's, the essence from these aromatic plants that want to be in the air. So it's really one of the best ways to use them. I'm diffusing a blend of wild orange, lavender, and peppermint oil. As you're listening, that's what I'm inhaling. Orange is for rejuvenation and vitality. And, because I haven't had a full night's sleep in a little while, I really wanted that to have an effect. And, lavender to calm my nerves and to alleviate any stress I might be feeling as I prepare for these classes and, for this show. And peppermint to concentrate, to give me a little alertness and to focus on what I'm doing right now. So, diffusing with, a water ionizing diffuser is one of the best ways to use them. Because they're vaporous in nature. They want to be in the air. And I love the fact that, you're working with the immune system of the plant. So, and they're fighting the same pathogens we are. So these aromatic plants are our allies in health, well-being. I really love working with that. Another experience I had with modalities is I had my first, family constellation group session. And you've heard me talk about this if you've tuned in before. Family constellation was something that was just so transformative for me. I had deep healing because I was lacking understanding. For me, I get into the irrational thought that I'm an isolated entity, that I'm not affected by anything else, that all of the irrational thoughts, all of the pain and suffering that I'm going through, despite the fact that I'm empathic, that it's all mine, coming from me. When the truth of the matter is, you're never separate from your system. So many things influence who we are, and a lot of times we are underestimating that influence, and we forget, and it creates judgment instead of compassion. So I'll never forget my first family constellation group session several years back. My friend Carolina was offering it in her apartment in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and I had personally never heard of the work beforehand. But, Carolina talked so highly of it. She was so passionate about it. I couldn't ignore it, and I really respected her opinion. She was really, really knowledgeable. So I decided to give it a try. I was not sure what to expect. I filled out this extensive questionnaire about my family's history, all of my parents' siblings, as many ancestors as as I knew about and could remember. Any patterns in history and health and circumstances, things like that, anything I wanted to share. I filled out this extensive paperwork. And then I just showed up and I was ready for whatever was going to happen. I didn't know. All I knew was Carolina was really passionate about this. So I really, really wanted to give it a try too. And it was a really small group. So, sometimes there's different forms of family constellation. And one of them is in group work. And, different people represent different, members of the family or system that you're constellating. So, because we had a small group, we all participated in every single constellation. And what happens is the individual who's working, and whose family or system, the group is exploring at that time, they may choose representatives to stand in for members of the family or system or group, whatever it is we're constellating. And I was immediately stunned when, that I was taking on sensations and posture, tone of voice, thoughts, etc., that were not mine. I did not walk in with them. When I was asked to represent a grandfather at one point, because we only had one male in the group, so, and oftentimes this will happen, men will play with, when I say play, because I see it as acting work, but it's not. It's called representing. I do that all the time. Because what happened was I saw new possibilities for my acting work with this system too. Art and spiritual healing and things like that are just go so hand in hand. So I often say that. I was playing the father, but no, I was representing is the proper term. So when I would represent, at one point I was representing a grandfather, because, there was a lack of males in the group. I was in awe at the lack of emotion, the physical rigidity that I seemed to take on as I stood in his position in the system. It was quite incredible, as someone who is typically very sensitive and emotional by nature. When I later talked to my healer at the time about my experience, she confirmed that this type of work was sort of like consensual possession. And that you're signing up to experience the empathy and sort of extreme compassion of literally standing in another's energy, and seeing what it feels like to be in that position in the system. And it was so transformative and enlightening that I went on to study the modality and continue to have, participate in these group sessions is where I found the most healing. But I had a lot of, amazing experiences doing one-on-one session work as well with, a family constellation, practitioner, facilitator. But, the group work was really intense because you learned by observing what was happening in the system, and you could relate it to, your own family, your own system, and see patterns. You could also really learn a lot by representing, like I said, stepping into the shoes or the energy of somebody else and what it was like to stand in their position and to not judge them. That's another thing I learned and gained from this work is that oftentimes, we like to label people as, they're the evil one or, they're the angel. That's the angel of the family. And when we really, step in and observe impartially, we can see that it's really in the influence of, the position the person's in the family oftentimes, the order Oftentimes there's a lack of order in the system. So the life force energy isn't flowing optimally. And it's pretty incredible the effect that our ancestry can have on us now and what we're experiencing. I had amazing eye-opening conversations with Carolina and other people who really study this in depth about the experiences of, when it's inappropriate for in a family unit to express emotions, for example. And so the emotional process and emotional expression is denied. It's seen as inappropriate, excessive, and unnecessary, and we will not allow it, right? There's a rule. In later generations, oftentimes you'll find one person will need to carry all the emotions, and it's impossible. It's just too heavy. So family constellation work can really help with placing those emotions back to the person that they originated with, and being able to move forward with a much lighter feeling, understanding your boundaries more, because so many of us are walking around with really messy boundaries. We don't understand how to hold that for ourselves, and it's something I'm still working through, especially with the tendency to take on empathic sensations and things like that. It can be a messy process to learn this lesson, but it's not impossible. We can all do that. And in that sense, really working on self-trust and believing that we can show up as our best self, and continuing to do things that care for us, care for our inner child, and process out some of this pain and some of the things that we're carrying. Because oftentimes we have this inability to have success and make an impact in the world because we're really lacking this innate sense of trust in ourselves to handle what comes in other people. There's a sense of mistrust. If we don't trust ourselves, we can't trust others. So it's this whole process, and it's something that I have finally acknowledged that it's not everyone else, it's me, and working on meeting my own needs and working on my impossible standards for myself, and just taking better care, because it's impossible to help other people if you're out of balance, if you're not well, if you're consistently not showing up for yourself and abandoning yourself. You can't be there for other people. So that's out of integrity. And there's this protocol in Jikajin Reiki that's called Seheki Chirio, and it's about ridding yourself and releasing patterns of behavior that we no longer want to carry with us. And we kind of want to break down this pattern, get to the source, and move forward without it. And for me, it was really this mistrust of myself, because I would oftentimes just pile on more work. Sure, let me ignore this innate sense of no, I don't want to do that, and just feel obligated. But therein lies the wounding, right? When we don't feel enough, when we're out of touch with our sense of worthiness, we tend to give too much of ourselves. We tend to forget that, there needs to be a reserve for us, and that the overflow is where generosity comes from. Not giving away, our essence and the things that are the energy and the vitality that's essential to us. So we lose trust in ourselves when we overgive, and it's this pattern, right? Because and it can feel a little manic at times, because there are times where we feel so good that we feel like I can do this and I can do that, and there's the pattern, right? To see it when it initiates. When you're feeling good, that's when the pattern starts. But we often don't take note until we're feeling used up and feeling bad. But it starts when we're feeling great. We're well rested. We're taking great care of ourselves. Then the pattern begins of overbooking, of making too many promises we can't fulfill, of creating these standards for ourselves that are unsustainable. So knowing that that's where to look, not waiting until you're so used up that you don't have the mental capacity to make a change. Know that the pattern is going to start when you're feeling great, when you're feeling renewed, when you're feeling recharged. That's where it originates. And we set ourselves up to kind of get used up. So just realize that can be a wounding of this irrational thought that you need to prove your worthiness. And, another thing that I carry with me from my Reiki training is what they call the Gokai, or the Reiki principles. And in the history of Reiki, Usui, who is the founder of this one system of Reiki, he's not the founder of Reiki, right? He just founded this one system of Reiki that many of us know by abbreviation as Reiki. He did a lot of healing in this Japanese town, and then when he came back, everyone was back to illness and living in a way that created this dysfunction. So he found that he needed to create principles for people to follow for optimal health and well-being. So, those principles are: just for today, do not be angry. Just for today, do not worry. Be grateful. Do your duties fully, and be kind to every living being. And the key is just for today, to make it sustainable. We can do that for just one day. And as soon as you realize you're out of alignment in that, coming back to it. And I do recite those in Japanese. That's how I was taught to do it. And it has been really amazing, because I found that, my brain wants to do things and go on certain tracks by default. And oftentimes they lead me to negative places. I have certain patterning, like, rushing, worrying, being angry. Road rage is a huge one, or feeling anxiety as I'm driving and someone drives too close behind me. There are instances where I realize it'd be really good to override this with something positive. And that's where I implement, the reciting of this and remembering that everything's okay. And, the sequence of, the phrases in Japanese are really powerful and, really do kind of override the system and bring a sense of ease and grace and, put you back into a place of alignment. And that word gets thrown around a lot. What I'm actually referring to is, instead of always moving forward in life, and pushing things and forcing things, coming at it from a place of ease, where we feel really connected to a higher power, a higher sense of self or energy. Some people call it God or creator. It's like this pillar of light coming down and aligning us, and also connecting us to the earth. So that alignment prevents us from sort of forcefully asserting our will on other people. But we can also have a forward moving sense without coming out of ourselves and pushing and controlling and forcing things to happen. It gives life more of an ease, more of a flow. And it's actually a much more powerful position. You have more influence there, because, you come across as more trustworthy, first of all. And because you need less from others because you're connected to a higher infinite source. So anytime you find yourself, feeling these feelings of anxiousness, worry, one thing you can do just with your mind is visualize that pillar of light coming down and holding you and sustaining you and melting the tension away and giving you that sense of grace and ease. You can still move forward, you can still have an idea of where you want to go, what you want to do, but it's much less intrusive to other people. And in that sense, you can trust yourself more, you can trust life more coming from that place. Another thing that has come up for me recently that's been really powerful is being willing to feel pain. We do so many things to numb out. And, in this new age of positivity, we often judge people for feeling negative emotions, and just really processing things. I'm guilty of that as well, of not wanting to put up with people's negative emotions sometimes and villainizing them for it. But the truth of the matter is we have to walk through some pain. That's inevitable. Even growing comes with pain. And on the other side of that is the reward or the gifts. And then you don't have to carry it with you. That's really been my experience. Anytime there's an emotion that's kind of recurring, you have to wonder, am I allowing myself to feel it, or do I work too hard at numbing it out? Do I resist it? Because I found that once I allow myself the process of feeling the uncomfortable sensations, I find myself on the other side of it. And yeah, it might come up again, but it's not this cycle. This cycle of sadness, this cycle of anxiety, this cycle of, I allow myself to feel it for as long as it needs to be there. I'm present with it. I ask, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to do? I know I'm meant to learn from you. What are you trying to tell me? The body is so intelligent. It's communicating to us with sensations, gut feelings, emotions. And when we make any of that wrong, we sometimes can see our body as the enemy. And it's really working for us and it's guiding us. And when we feel something is off or we have a negative emotion associated with something, oftentimes that's guidance for us to listen to. Maybe show caution, before moving forward. So just think about that, there are instances where we're unwilling to feel uncomfortable, not even necessarily pain, just uncomfortable, emotion. And it's preventing us from moving forward. Oftentimes when I'm doing a reading with a client, I'll have something that just feels too uncomfortable for me to say come up. I'll just judge it and I'll say, no, I can't talk about that. Like, I'm embarrassed to mention whatever it is, right? Like, I'll see a black rose and I'll be like, I don't know what that means. I'm not going to say that. Just next. But it will keep coming until I express it and then I can move forward. And oftentimes that is the thing that the person resonates with the most. And for me, it makes no sense and I can't interpret it. But for them, it's very specific and has a very specific meaning. So I think it's the same when our body's guiding us and showing us things. and making us feel certain sensations as a guiding system. If we ignore it and judge it, we miss the message. We miss the guidance. So make a friend of your body, and its sensations and its emotions. It's all there for a reason. Oftentimes we have this pain that we're living with that we've ignored. We don't really listen to it. And there could be so much wisdom there. It's one of the reasons I'm studying this medical intuition. I think that it's so fascinating. So look into it if you're interested at all. Carolyn Neese is teaching this course on medical intuition. I think it's pre-recorded, but it's just so fascinating. So anyway, all right, Wolfpack, it was so wonderful to hang out with you, share some stories of my experiences with different modalities of healing. And, I have thousands of these instances from my healing journey and probably many more to come, which is very exciting for me. Although it's scary in the moment, right? Because it's so unexpected and unusual. But, I really usually do love doing live session work here. But I thought it might be nice just to get to know me and my experiences before asking you to entrust me live with any sort of work. So I felt like maybe it'd be nice just to, understand my point of view and build some rapport first, maybe relate a little bit. But going forward, I'd love to do maybe some more live constellation work. I experimented with live meditation. I think that needs some adjustment. I didn't really like listening back all of the empty space. Probably not perfect for radio. So thinking about all the things we could do together, this is such a great opportunity to connect. And, while we're all putting our consciousness in this one, space, it can be really, really a great opportunity for healing and for connecting. So, I do hope to do that in the future. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Please donate to wolfspiritradio.com. This is a listener-based, listener-sponsored system. So please keep that in mind and support the station. And don't forget to find me on Instagram, urban_empath. I love to connect with you there. Search Urban Empath on Facebook and YouTube as well. And please do RSVP for Nourish Yourself with Essential Oils at urbanempath.com/blog. It's the first entry. We'll give you the dates and times and let me know when you're coming. I'd love to have you. Free online event. If you're interested at all. Thank you so much, JP, for your support. And thank you all for tuning in on this beautiful Sunday. Until we meet again.